Unreal Engine editor utility blueprints are a great way to batch process different assets in the content browser or actors directly in the level. In this video, we will take a look at two specific editor utility blueprints classes. We will see how to create some handy script that we can run directly from the editor and that it will allow us to make certain operations on many assets or actors at the same time. In the description below, you will find a link to a free Gumroad package that contains some of the utilities we will see today. That said, get ready for some automation and let's dive into it. This is Nazza here, co-founder and tech artist at MyDesign. If you like the content, please give a like, share and subscribe. If you're already subscribed, just click the bell icon so you're notified of any new fresh tutorial that comes out. With this out of the way, let's see how we can take advantage of these editor utility blueprints. Here at the studio, we use them quite a lot for fixing many assets at once or for applying the same properties to a lot of content. In order to use these editor utilities, we need to go to plugin first, built-in plugins, and look for editor blue and enable these editor scripting utilities. The editor will probably ask you to restart, and after that you will have a new category here in the content browser with editor utilities. From there you can create two types of utilities, a blueprint and a widget. Today we will focus on blueprints that are small scriptable actions we can directly run, right-clicking on assets and like this one for example, and we will have these scripted actions here as an option, and we will be presented with just the options for the kind of asset we currently select. But let's see step by step how it works. If we try to create a new editor utility blueprint, we get asked to choose a class between a lot of them. We will just focus on two of them, and these are the actor action utility and the asset action utility. So at the moment we create the blueprint, we choose if we want to target an actor in the scene or an asset in our content browser. So these are the two main categories, and if we choose, for example, asset action utility and select and give it a name like blue assets, just a simple one, and we open it, we will be presented with the event graph as always for blueprints. So before diving into creating some utility from scratch, let's see something I already created. So as you can see, I divided the utilities by type. So the one that I named browser here are aimed to assets like the one we just created. The one that I named blue level, it's aimed to actors in the scene. So this is the main category, and then I specified further that in this blueprint I will target specifically material instances, and so create scripts just for material instances. In this case I will create scripts for static meshes in the browser, so assets in the content browser, and in this case for textures in the content browser, and the only case I'm using currently right now for actors is targeting static meshes. For example, it's interesting to take a look at first to the textures one. You can create your different scripts directly in the event graph if you want. You just need to create a custom event and then remember to enable it for call in editor and compile. And after that, everything we will do, it's the same. What I like to do in my case is to create a function, a different function for every script I want to make. So here, for example, we have a script that changes a couple of parameters in the selected textures and makes them correctly black and white masks. So for example, usually all our roughness maps are going through this process. So I just need to batch select a number of roughness maps, right click and apply the script. But let's see how it works in action. So let's jump to textures. If we look for roughness maps, let's select a bunch of them like these, right click, scripted actions, and here I have all the options for the textures. So all the scripts I created for textures and only for textures. I can apply the fix black and white maps settings, and this is done to any of them in a batch process. If we open one of them, we'll see that the compression is now masks and the sRGB is turned off. And you can see also that the assets were automatically saved and checked out from source control if you have it enabled here. But let's go back to our newly created blueprint utility and see how to make some of these scripts, because the main structure of the script is always the same. So once we have created one, you can repeat it and just change the asset you want to target and the different commands and settings you want to apply to it. But the main structure and the main steps and the same nodes are repeated multiple times. So the first thing to do is to come up here under functions and get supported class. If we delete this node here, we can specify which asset we want to target in this case. So let's say we want to target textures. We just write textures here and look for the right one, and I guess it's this one. We just said to this blueprint that the things we will script inside here will show up only when we right click on textures. With that done, we can move on creating our first script. We want to create a script that disables sRGB on multiple textures at once. I know that this and many other scripts you will find in these utilities are totally doable with the bulk edit via property matrix inside the editor, but I find it a little bit more convenient. It's just a click, a right click, and then an option, and then you will have multiple settings applied to multiple assets at the same time. So let's create our function. Let's call it no sRGB. And the first thing to do is to get the selected assets. So get selected assets in this case, because we are targeting stuff in the content browser. And then we will need a for each loop. And then we will cast the texture. And then we create a copy for undo buffer. So these steps are always the same. Of course, you will cast to a different type depending on the blueprint you are creating, but these 5 nodes are always the same. Aside of that, so we get what we selected in the content browser, and for each we're gonna cast to the texture and create copy for undo buffer. It's useful because everything that is done after it we can undo and go back. So if we want to go back after applying a bunch of settings to a bunch of assets, having this node in place, we can go back and reset the settings. After that, it's finally time to apply our settings we want to modify to the selected textures. So we grab here and say sRGB in our case, and we want to set the sRGB to false, so it's already nice like this. In this case, it's the only setting we want to change, so we can move on to the closing part of the script. And also this one is always the same. I always use source control, so I really like to have the checkout loaded asset and the save loaded asset. So after the command is changed and everything is done, the asset gets automatically checked out to source control and saved locally. So I don't have to do anything, and I'm sure that everything I do is checked out, is saved, and nothing gets lost. This little script is done. So if we compile and if we go back to our textures and we select some other, right click, no sRGB, our new entry is here. If we click it, the editor will go through every texture, make the changes, save it, check it out, and it's done. As you can see, sRGB is turned off. So let's say we want to make another script for black and white textures like the roughness map. We can, in this case, duplicate this one and call it black white fix. In this case, the structure is the same, we just need to add a node here, compression settings. So we have access to many settings we can see in the texture panel. So if we look for compression settings, we have all the compression settings available. In this case, we want these black and white textures to be recognized as masks. So we set it to masks and connect it here and here, and we are done. So this is So this is a script we can use for black and white textures. It will change the compression settings to masks and then disable the sRGB at the same time. So we have two actions in this case, and you can go on and on and on, because you can look for filters, for example, and change the filtering of the maps. And if we go to, for example, variables, we can see a lot of the options available. So for compression, we have the set compression, the quality. If we go to texture, we see the set filter we just created here, set power off to mode, set MIP load options, and many more. So you can go down here under variables and see all the settings available, all the settings you can automate, and create the corresponding node and add it to the chain here in the middle between the first part and the saving ending part of the script. I went to this random scene so I can show you a couple more tricks we can do with Blueprint scripts utilities. So for example, for architectural visualization, we always start with probably a 3D model from SketchUp or other programs, usually coming from the client or other studios. So after we clean it up and import it into Unreal, we usually have to set a lot of materials to the same stuff. For example, for walls, we can select multiple static meshes and right click as always and assign material to selected. We can choose the index we want to target in this case, but let's say wall white, we shall see, and apply it. As always, the editor will go through each of them, save them, check them out, and we can quickly have a material assigned to multiple meshes, and it was just a few seconds. Another super handy feature always for static meshes in the browser is to delete collisions. Maybe we imported static meshes and we forgot to untick the collision generations, or just we want to get rid of collisions this time. We can select multiple static meshes also in the scene, because it's easier to spot them if we enable the collisions here in the show menu. We can select them directly in the scene. Let's find some other static mesh with collisions, probably these and these and this one. So we can select all of them. In the case of a giraffe, I need to select just one of them, but that's okay. Ctrl B, so I get all the static meshes selected in the content browser. Right click on one of those and remove collisions. And voila, everything is now without collisions. We can select the static meshes inside the blueprint, right click and remove collisions. For the static mesh actors inside the scene, something we can take a look in here, for example. So as always, we created this one for actors instead of assets. So when I created this one, I created it with this class, asset action utility, and then I specified the class to be static mesh actor. And the interesting one is this one. Another problem usually with received architectural visualization 3D models is that the same material is applied in different channels, in different index, and spotting and changing it accordingly, it's quite tricky sometimes. With this script, if we take a look here, we have these two walls with just one index and this blue material. We have this other wall with the blue material at index 0 and index 1 for the red one. And then we have these two walls with the red material and index 0 and the blue one at 1. But with this script, we can select all of them and switch selected material instance. We have to say the material we want to target, in our case is the rough blue, and we need to say the material we want to change it into, and independently of the index, the script will check which material is applied to every channel of every static mesh and change it accordingly when it will find our rough metal deep blue in this case. So if we click OK, the copper one is applied correctly to every mesh independently of the index of the material. So this is super useful sometimes. So as you can see, the possibilities are almost endless. You can really think about many things you can automate and a lot of steps that you can speed up. My suggestion is always to look into things you do repeatedly. In most cases, it's something you can automate in some way in Unreal or any other software via scripting or visual scripting, like in this case. I will clean up and wrap all these utilities into a package I will release for free on Gumroad along with this video. So these were the editor utility blueprints in Unreal Engine. Let me know if you already use it. If you liked this video, leave a like, subscribe, share it. It really helps tremendously, and see you to the next one.